What's up, Knicks fans? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Cap Rules Everything Around Me. Cream, get the money, dollar dollar bills, y'all. My name is Jeremy Cohen, and it is July 8th. Summer League starts very soon. Not a whole lot of action that has happened in the last few days, but one thing that did indeed occur is Ariel Hukporti signed a two-way contract. We talked through him signing, him not signing. Jericho Sims, who was also signed to who was also drafted 58th overall back in 2021. He signed a two-way contract and spent his first year as a two-way. And then the following summer, he signed a big league contract. So it's not a huge shocker, especially considering that he's the 58th pick, that Hukporti would be on a two-way, but it gives us a little bit more clarity. The Knicks, as of right now, have 3 open roster spots if they want it. So there was the prevailing thought of if they signed both of the two-way players to a guaranteed contract, that might bump them up to 14, make it a little bit more difficult for them from a flexibility standpoint. But with Hukporti on a two-way, the Knicks now can use their 3 open spots however they choose. They just have to fill 2 of them. The rule is that the Knicks have to roster 14 players on a big league contract by the regular season. I believe it's really the day before the regular season, but it's the regular season nonetheless. As a result, you have to wonder who's going to be there. Maybe Kevin McCullough Jr. is an option. Maybe he goes on the two-way as well. If he's on the two-way, then that still leaves them with 3 open roster spots. It's hard not to see Ryan Arcidiacono maybe getting in on a non-guaranteed contract action, little Exhibit 9, Exhibit 10, whichever one applies there for him and how he goes there. So the Knicks are at 12, and they're moving and grooving. They've got some more work to do. Hopefully it's resolved this week. Of course, as John and I talked about, it's not like the Knicks can play their draft talent if they aren't signed to some form of a contract, even if it's a summer league deal. Also, Rokas Jokubaitis, Lithuania being knocked out. Will he come over? There's a report that he might be able to, as earlier reported, be an option. So we'll see if he comes over. I certainly hope he would. Would be fun to watch him. So that's where the Knicks are at right this moment. And I'll mostly leave this open to the floor. This might be the last episode of C.R.E.A.M of the summer. But it may not be. It depends certainly on what the Knicks do and, people's appetite for cream. Just going to let that one sit there. So other than that, we've got Kev on the 1s and 2s. Kev, if we have any questions, any comments, feedback, criticism, whatever it is, lay it on me. First one from Kevin Danishevsky. Kevin, thank you for the super chat contribution. Hey, Jer, I know you don't think Randle's getting moved this offseason, but by chance he does. Who can you see it for / what would the package be? It's funny that you asked that, Kevin, because I actually was running an errand. The trick that I've learned, for those of you who live in New York, go to a bagel place at the end of the day. They've got extra bagels. They're not stale. They'll give you an extra one. It's a great deal. So that's what I did. And as I was doing that, getting a free bagel, I was thinking, of course I paid for the others, but what would this be if Julius Randle didn't extend? How would the Knicks operate? And it's a question that I was hoping I would have more time to look into. But thanks to Kevin and his generosity, I'm now thinking about it right now. So the thing about the Knicks is if you wanted to use Julius Randle to acquire another player this offseason, the common belief would be that the Knicks are trying to use Randle to get more money in the door next year. So what it would essentially mean is you want to trade Randle for someone who is making good money next year. But the problem is you can't trade for that player now because, number one, their salary is probably too high. And number two, even if it's not too high for the trade to go through, you're probably taking more money in, hard caps you at the first apron. Okay, so what if they went the route of acquiring, player X, and player X is earning $27 million. And then the Knicks wanted to extend said player. Well, they could do that, but they'd also be limited in terms of what they could offer. They could extend that player from the jump, but I believe it would be 105% salary increase. So 27 times 105%. It's not going to get you into the mid 30s, very low 40s range that Julius Randle could get you in. Of course, the low 40s range being under 41 million. So then you have to think through, are you adding other salary? What else gets you to a point where you feel comfortable to move said player? But also, what are you getting? Because with Julius Randle, you have a legitimate playmaker. You have someone who creates opportunities for other members of the team. And there aren't a lot of guys who are in the position where they're on the block at a good salary that doesn't hard cap the Knicks at the first apron, that doesn't involve other pieces potentially being moved, and finding that right fit. It's really difficult. It's why, and I want to look even further into this. And it could be an exercise in futility because the Knicks agree to a contract extension with Julius Randle, and that's that. But at some point, maybe over the next week or so, I'll look into contracts because there aren't a whole lot of guys that come to mind where you can essentially stick to business as usual and bring in someone who is on par with Julius or helps you contractually. And that's the main issue. So I think it's a really good question, Kevin. If you want to pivot from Julius this summer, what would it look like? How would it help you further your other goals? And there aren't a lot of options. There aren't a lot of guys who can do what Julius does, who are available, and who are worth more on the trade block. That's the prevailing question. So, but I like it. I like it a lot. Thank you. It's one that I will give a better answer to, but in the interim, it's a short list. And by short, I don't really know if there's anyone who fits that criteria. And the other thing I'll add, if the Knicks didn't want to go through the 105% extension with whoever was eligible, it's 6 months. And then, so 6 months to sign a larger extension. That would be at 140%. But then there's the trade restriction of another 6 months. So, you'd have to do it right now. It'd basically have to happen now. And it would surprise me if the Knicks went into this summer, later into this summer, and were blindsided by a Julius Randle decision. I'm sure that they've done homework. There's flexibility. I don't want to sit here and say it's a shoo-in that he's extended, but based on the conversation John and I had yesterday revolving around Julius, I feel like there's a good chance that he does. And I still wonder if Jalen Brunson taking some extension, even though that has nothing to do with Julius Randle's pocketbooks, if that might inspire him to do it. But Isaiah Hartenstein left. The money wasn't comparable, though. The money was not. Contrary to popular belief that might exist out there with the Knicks mismanaging the salary cap, there really was nothing they could do with Isaiah Hartenstein and the early bird rights. There was no cap space to create to sign him. And I know there's still a prevailing thought that there's like this big mistake, this big flaw. If people would like to push forward why it's a flaw, why it's this huge mistake, go right ahead. But the Knicks they were capped at what they could do. I digress. Thank you, Kevin. Ryan K. Quigley, appreciate your super chat contribution. Randall, Mitch, and Deuce for Jaren Jackson Jr. and Smart. Impossible. No. Well, I haven't looked at this specific deal. The question, of course, is more money coming in than going out? Screw it. I'll look at Fanspo. It's a great resource for Knicks fans. So as I sit here pulling up the teams, of course, first team I'm going to have is the Knicks. The second team that I will have is the Grizzlies. And we will go with Julius Randle. And we will go with Mitchell Robinson. And we will go with Deuce McBride. And on the receiving end, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Marcus Smart. And when we hit final, let's see. The Knicks save money. So shout out to Ryan for coming up with a deal that saves money. The Knicks could make this trade because they wouldn't be hard capped at that first apron. Now, the question of, is this worth it? Main thing for me comes down to, start with the Marcus Smart angle of it. I don't know where the time is coming for him to play. If Jaren Jackson Jr. is starting, and he likely would, the idea here is, okay, well, he's a center. But also, Memphis has played so many games with Jaren Jackson at the 5 that it's just not a great move for them. There's a reason why they have focused on bringing in fives, Steven Adams, Zach Edey in this case. Mind you, Zach Edey probably starting at the 5. You can't really play Edey and Robinson together. And when I say you can't really, you can't at all. So if you're looking at the Grizzlies and the Knicks and how you're trying to operate, it's really tough. It's really challenging. Then you bring in the Marcus Smart portion. It's okay, well, Smart's a great defender. Even if you move Jackson to the 5, which I really wouldn't necessarily recommend, but is certainly an option. Okay, fine. What about Marcus Smart? Well, where's the playing time for him? You brought in Mikal Bridges. He's going to see a lot of time. Jalen Brunson's going to see heavy time. DiVincenzo is still going to see time. I just don't think the playing time is there for him. That's really the prevailing thought. I just don't quite see it. So while I know that financially it works, I think this actually removes a playmaker from the starting 5 with Randle, also takes out a starting center, puts in a player who, the shuttle hasn't really come around for Jaren Jackson Jr. I know we like to think of him as this great shooting player. He hasn't. It just hasn't come around a whole lot. Injuries have been a concern. I mean, just looking purely at Jaren Jackson's 3-point% shooting, which isn't everything, but it's something considering what the Knicks like. I mean, this is someone who has shot above 35% once in the last 4 seasons. Season before that, shot 39.4. Season before that, 35.9. But looking recent history, hasn't been the best for them. Now, Randle, of course, hasn't done a whole lot, and you get the defensive side from Jaren Jackson. But it's still, the focus on rebounding gets lost. And it's just not something that Jaren Jackson is very good at. So if the Knicks want to keep focusing on rebounding, which they do, from the center position, don't think Jackson is the right option. But I like the thought of it, Ryan. Thank you. I also appreciate you bringing a trade that doesn't hard cap them at the first apron. So thank you very much for that. Hannibal Miles. Appreciate the super chat contribution from you, Hannibal. Why the high price contract for Kolek and why decide not to stash Dadier when they want more flexibility? So by high priced contract for Kolek, Tyler Kolek received the highest second round contract in NBA history. That's probably going to be a record that's set every year just based on how salary cap will be moving. And look, they could have given him chump change. They didn't. They gave him $1 million more in year 1 than he would have gotten otherwise. And that's fine because that's okay. And the reason that's okay as well, Dadier's contract offsets it a little bit. But at the end of the day, we're talking about Dadier and Kolek making probably under $4 million, give or take, around $4 million at least in the 2025-26 season. If you need cheap bench depth, look no further than that. In terms of why not to stash him, well, it could certainly be that Dadier wanted to play overseas. And while it's not entirely his choice, typically agents and teams have some sort of lines of communication. They'd have to have been at least a passing conversation, I gather. But for Dadier, it's really, from the Knicks perspective, you're not paying a whole lot. I mean, he's earning $1.8 million. That's less than the cap hit for a 10-year veteran. And you're bringing him in to an environment where he's able to learn. You trust the coaching staff. You trust the development. Look at what the Knicks have done in development. Now, Rokas Jokubaitis has been over in Spain, and he's been a third-string point guard because in Spain, they don't focus on development quite in the way that the Knicks might do here. And so there's a thought, Rokas Jokubaitis could come over. Maybe he does. But at least you focus internally and you look at the talent that's here, that's on the coaching staff, and you think about how can we best put this player in a position to succeed. And it could very easily be the G League for Dadier, pretty much the entire season. I don't suspect he'll get a whole lot of time in the on the NBA team, but maybe he does. Probably not a lot, again, but maybe he gets something. So for the Knicks, it's a bet on development. It's a bet on your staff. It's a bet on internal usage of how Dadier comes into play. Um, so for, about $4 million next year and a little under that or give or take this year, it's okay. It's not breaking any banks. And the Knicks also have ample space with the second apron now. They've got a lot of room to play with. So they could afford to line someone's pockets a little bit more as long as it doesn't hurt them the following year. Because the following year is, you're talking about flexibility. They're game planning so that the following year doesn't hurt them quite in that way. But I appreciate that question, Hannibal. Dirty Dancer. Enough with Arch. Get Lowry if you want another Nova guy. Again, it comes down to the playing time. If Kyle Lowry is here, it's probably because it's probably because Deuce McBride is not on the team. And in which case, I am all for it. And if Lowry wants to sit on the bench and be the 10th man, go ahead. But I just don't expect him to embrace that role. Not when he has more to play for, not where there's probably other teams that can give him more of a role than that. They might even be able to give him the same amount of money as the tax mid-level. More if the Knicks weren't necessarily going to do that. So, we'll see. But I think it's just assumed at this point that Ryan Arcidiacono will have some role on this team based on who his friends are. Big Surge. Duren. For Jalen Duren, is there smoke in Detroit? Detroit has to, and Big Surge saying, Jeremy, does the proposed Mitch and Deuce for Duren and Ivy trade make sense financially? So from the Knicks perspective, let's talk about the finances. No, it doesn't make sense for the Knicks financially. And I'll tell you why. The Knicks are trading a lot of money out to get these two players. And it doesn't make sense for them to do that, especially if they view either of those players as salary that they can use moving forward. You can't easily add salary. So if you're the Knicks and you're trading Mitchell Robinson and his, 13, 14, however $million deal, and Deuce McBride on his sub $5 million deal for two rookie scale players, it doesn't do anything for them financially. Now, a big name player comes out. Who are the Knicks trading to get to the salary where they're a second apron team? Well, they need to stack salaries and they can't stack minimum deals, and they're not going to trade any of the Nova players, and they're not going to trade OG Anunoby. So it's Julius Randle. But then you have to add other salaries. And Duren and Ivy isn't enough to get you some of the bigger name players if that's what you're trying to get. So I don't think it makes sense. And from a Duren focus, it's hard to judge him because of what's happened in his career in Detroit. They're also all, I don't want to say reports, right? But it doesn't seem like Duren is exactly known for his defense. And that's something that's generally important to the Knicks. The cost of getting Duren would probably be pretty high, higher than the Knicks might feel comfortable getting or giving. So I just don't see it making sense for either team. It's one of those trades where sometimes when both fan bases are vehemently against a trade, it actually makes sense. But this is one of those times where it doesn't make sense for either of them, truly, because the Pistons, they still have to figure out what Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey are. And the Knicks aren't in a position to try to do reclamation projects, so to speak. And also it doesn't behoove them, or really doesn't benefit them at all to go out and get younger players who don't carry the necessary salary filler value that they might need. So it doesn't make sense to me. I don't see it as a trade that works. Duren as a backup, sure. But then what's the cost of that? And does he fit exactly what you're looking for? Probably expensive and probably not, respectively, with those answers. Jason M. Predictions for who the backup center will be next season. I'm going to go with Nick Richards. The reason I'll go with Nick Richards is, and I'm saying this partially, to see if it goes the opposite direction, because it'd be a nice jinx to get Walker Kessler, but you're playing with Danny Ainge here. So at a certain point, what the Knicks need is a cheap rebounder who can finish. And there's bloom there. A lot of Richards' defensive numbers are not there. I was talking with Prez today. He was crunching some tape, and he felt better about Nick Richards, of course, than the numbers show. And they're bad. I mean, they're not bad. They're mediocre, to say the least. His defensive EPM is like in the 40s percentile wise. He also reminded me that Worldwide Wes was very much interested in the Knicks drafting Nick Richards. The Jazz are also just such a weird team. You know, there's the report now that maybe they're going to keep Lauri Markkanen and renegotiate. Yeah, if the offers aren't there for them, I'm sure they're interested in it. But it feels like something that you'd also want to leak, because it's then saying to teams, well, he's going to be off the market entirely unless you pony up. So, you know, I don't know. And it's like, if it comes down to Deuce McBride or not, I get the argument and wouldn't hate Deuce McBride to Utah and the Knicks using the tax mid-level to sign Lowry. That's fine. But still, it feels like if you can find cheap talent at the backup five that you're confident in, don't pay too much for it. Because what have we seen the Knicks do? We have seen the Knicks take talent. Specifically, we've seen the Knicks go after players using pieces outside of their rotation and then light to heavy draft compensation. And that's worked for them because they haven't taken away from what's working. They've just added to it. So you could focus on that. Also, Precious Achiuwa. Is that an option for them? I mean, figure he's going to go somewhere. In an ideal world, in my mind, you've got Achiuwa and you've got Richards. You'd have to sign Achiuwa first and then kind of do him dirty by getting Richards. But this is also a move that the Knicks can do at the deadline. There's no need for the Knicks to go out and get a center right now. It's just not something that they have to do. It'd be great if they did, but it's not imperative that they solve their team issues right this moment. So I'll predict backup center will be Nick Richards. JG, I'll likely be part of the replay gang, but just want to say what's up. Hey, JG. Let's go Knicks. C.R.E.A.M got the money, dollar bills, y'all. Try and re-sign Precious or trade for Nick Richards. I like Kessler, but stay away from Ainge. Exactly. Did not plan this. Thank you, Kev. Appreciate this. Again, I would love Walker Kessler here. I would prefer him to Nick Richards, but there's also a cost behind it. Is it going to hurt your team if you give up too much to get Walker Kessler in the door? Because we know that they have larger plans. They just do. And if you don't believe it, believe me. That's all I ask. That's the type of thing where you don't want to burn too much at the center position. With that said, if you're moving Mitchell Robinson next summer, you want a center you can trust. It then isn't simply just a backup big. It's someone who actually helps out your team in a way where you trust them to start. And the question, of course, the Knicks have to be asking themselves is, do they trust Nick Richards to start if he had to? And I think the answer would be yes, but also the results that we've seen from Richards on the defensive end would imply no, which is why I wonder what they see in him that is different, because we know that there's a Tibbs bump. That's really kind of it. So yeah, if they can get a good deal with Kessler, do it. But I would be surprised because of who's in charge over there. But we'll see. Manny Campos. Thank you, Manny. Appreciate the super chat contribution. Now that Tice got signed, is it a lock Precious comes back? Other than Richards slash Kessler, what type of contract would be looking for in a 5, i.e. player on a rookie deal, low salary, high salary? I don't think it's a lock that Precious comes back. I think there's a lock that the Knicks do something with Precious Achiuwa, whether it's retaining him or signing and trading him somewhere. But in terms of looking for another contract, I mean, it wouldn't be a larger salary because, again, hard caps you at the first apron. It could be a rookie deal, but what you really want is the Knicks to find a way to do any sort of move that protects them, where if they get hard capped at the second apron, they're all right. And by second apron, I don't mean this year. I mean next year. That's what you should be eyeballing. And as a result, someone like Richards, someone like Kessler, low salary guys who don't have to get paid until the following summer. And who knows what the salary cap situation looks like? Who knows what extensions look like? Like, there are moves that make a lot of sense. So, Tice to me really was never an option for the Knicks, just not that type of player that they covet. So, yeah, I'd say something will happen with Achua, whether it's Knicks retaining him or signing and trading for him, or signing and trading him. But if the Knicks are looking at other centers that high rebounders, good finishers, maybe something to offer on defense, and a low salary, Richards and Kessler are the best bets. And Achua's fine, but not as good. He's just not. Thank you, Manny. Jason M., do you think the Knicks will use the mid-level exception for the season to have a movable salary for the deadline or keep it for buyout candidates? They could, in fact, keep it for buyout candidates. It would certainly come in handy. I still wonder if they'll use the mid-level exception on a veteran if they don't get Richards or Kessler. And now maybe they do get Achua. But the question, of course, is, let's say they re-signed Precious Achua and then tried to do something with getting Richards. And the Hornets said, no, we're not really interested in that. Is it going to change that much in a few months at February? It could. Circumstances always differ, but I don't think so. I mean, it seems like you'd want to do something different. That's why I was wondering, using that movable salary as part of the TMLE, where you don't have to give the whole salary. You could just give some of it, enough to match up with the salary. I mean, look, if Precious Achiuwa is not traded away, the logical answer to me, if the Knicks still want a center, is to move Jericho Sims in some manner. And I got to tell you, I know he's been working on his game. That's fantastic. I don't see the runway for Jericho Sims being past the deadline. And the reason for that being, the Knicks try to turn something into something else before they have to. I don't think the Knicks really care enough to go into free agency next year to retain Jericho Sims when they've got Ariel Hukporti on a two-way, waiting in the wings, who could be signed to the rookie exception for cheaper than the minimum salary for Jericho Sims. So if you're using Sims's it's like $2,092,000 some odd dollars, you then want to figure out a way to do something with that money. But you need to find a way to get more than $5 million if you want Nick Richards. Hence, of course, the $3 or so million that a veteran would be signed to for that contract. That's what I would do if a trade can't be materialized. So do I think that they'll use it? As of this moment, I'll say no. But if they bring back Precious Achiuwa, I think there's a higher chance that they do. Especially if they want to keep talent in the door. Maybe they want to keep Achiuwa. Maybe they say to him, you're our backup 5. Go for it. And then at the deadline, they say, you know what? Things have changed. Sorry, Precious. It's not the way it's going to be. And he's under contract, so he doesn't have much of a say. That's the route I would take. I mean, it's not the kindest to Precious Achiuwa, but works out better. So yeah, bring back Achiuwa. Like to see the tax mid-level exception thing. Just not sure if it'll get to that point. EJ1. The Knicks gave up too much for Mikal Bridges, point blank, period. Let's talk about it. I've said in yesterday's pod that the Knicks gave up too much, that in a vacuum, they overpaid. I mean, think about it. Knicks gave up 4 unprotected picks and the Bucks pick and the Nets 2025 second round pick, which is basically going to be a late first. If we consider that as 6 picks for a wing who's 27 years old, turning 28, might be 28. I think it's 27. That's a lot. That's arguably too much. Hence why I think they overpaid. The way I see it, though, it's not just about the Knicks and like this is their team and they're good. I maintain, again, getting Julius Randle on an extension, adding Mitchell Robinson's salary, adding Deuce McBride's salary. That's enough financially, purely financially, to get you to a point where you could get any player in the NBA, again, financially, except for two. This is assuming Julius gets a max contract extension. And those two players, Stephen Curry, Damian Lillard, two players who make no sense on the Knicks. So the question then becomes, of course, how do you value those guys? What are their worths? How do you move forward? The most annoying thing, and the Nets did a really good job of this, getting the fourth unprotected pick as opposed to the Knicks kicking in one of the 2024 picks restricts what the Knicks can do. They can't offer a 2032 first round pick because they're trading their 2031 first round pick. So right now, at this point in time, the furthest pick the Knicks can trade would have been the 2031 pick, but it's going to Brooklyn. And Stepien rule means you can't trade back-to-back future picks. So the Knicks can't trade the 2032 pick when it becomes available to them in a year after the NBA draft concludes. Well, not even concludes, after their pick is made. What they can do, of course, are involve swap rights. They also have the Pistons pick. They also have the Wizards pick, which is really two glorified seconds, but they're going to be good second-round picks. And second-round picks at the top of the draft are important. So if you don't believe, and I'll just, I'll say it with my chest. I think the player that the Knicks are going to go after is Giannis Antetokounmpo. I said it on the Cats and Shoot podcast. The reason that I believe this is because of how much they love someone like Julius at the four, someone who can make plays and do stuff. The problem with Julius, well, really two problems. The first, he's not that upper echelon of player. The second is that Julius can't play the five. And that's a problem. Like, we can try to get it where maybe OG plays the five, but I personally would not want that. I think OG's at his best, and this is just my opinion. Others who are smarter than me when it comes to analyzing the X's and O's, I would love their input as well. But with OG, you look at it, and he can maybe defend the rim, but you also maybe want him moving more as a safety, matching up with wings, switching where he can. Getting someone who can play the five, like a small ball five that has a really good offensive rebounder, but also can make plays and open up your game so that you have four shooters around that five. That's great. And so to me, it's like, well, what are your options, right? You look at Devin Booker, it's harder to pry him from Phoenix because he's got so many years left on his contract. He's probably going to go to a higher bidder. I could see a team like the Rockets or even the Thunder saying, screw it. This is our move. We're going to go for it. We've got the picks. Like, the Rockets probably make more sense, but you just never know. So you look at that, and then you look at someone like Giannis, who will be 30 years old, 2 years of team control. This is probably the last ride for the Bucks, unless they could do something really drastic. I don't quite see what that is. I think the reason their team is largely as is isn't from a lack of trying. It's because the value is really tough to gauge, and they don't get these players. So if they come up short, there's a question of what they do. And then there's the question, of course, of what is the value of Julius Randle? What's the value of Deuce McBride, Mitchell Robinson, the pick swaps later on, and the first-round picks that the Knicks have? Like, to me, if I'm Milwaukee, a team that doesn't have the ability to make my own picks, I'm interested in win-now talent and picks and young talent. All of that is offered in that deal. You don't have to be mediocre, you don't have to be terrible for a few years. You can be mediocre at best. And for a lot of teams, it's hard to rip that Band-Aid off, especially when your picks are completely out the door from the Damian Lillard trade. Well, not even Damian Lillard trade. It's that, but it's also from the Drew Holiday trade. So they need some sort of help, and they can replenish some sort of draft stock as well if they move Damian Lillard as well. If they kind of become this like middle of the pack, hey, at least we can like kill time for a year or two and then really go more into a deep rebuild or rebuild on the fly. That's the point. So EJ1, where does this get back to? This gets back to the point where I do not believe for a single second that the Knicks, they've got some of the smartest people in the NBA. Truly, they do. I mean, their cap team is unreal. There's no way that they give the sign off to Leon Rose about mortgaging all of this if they don't have a level of comfortability and confidence that they can go out and do one more thing. And, if that was the cost of doing business, so be it. Because if it brings you something else that's really substantial, it was worth it. It was worth it. That's also why, if you're the Knicks, you trade out of the 11th pick in the 2022 draft. It's to get those picks. It's to be able to use them on things that matter. I mean, obviously the Knicks gave up a lot of their own picks to getting Mikal Bridges. They also gave up one of the picks that they got from trading out of the 11th pick in the 2022 draft. If they use the other two on and other things on superstar talent, pretty good cost of business. So I agree, EJ1. I agree that in a vacuum, the Knicks did overpay for Mikal Bridges, 100%. But also, if you got one more piece, if you have one more in the chamber and you can go big, there it is. That's it. So I think that's what they'll try to do, certainly. Thank you. JM, appreciate the super chat contribution here. Can you give an example of how the new second apron draft pick penalty, pick end of first round, would work? Can any picks Nets owned by Phoenix or New York be 30? So what JM is talking about is if you are above the second apron for 2 years out of 4, you have your first round pick, wherever it would be, 7 years out, moved to the back of the draft. It would become the 30th pick. It's not picks owned by other teams. It's the pick that's 7 years out. So the assumption here with how it would work is you have, let's say a team that's in this position has their picks in year 6 and year 7, and they go over the apron. It's that 7th year, that 7th and final time, that pick is frozen. Now, if that team goes under, then they get that pick back. This is part of why, especially with the tax bill, it's so heavily believed that this is a last dance year for the Suns. I mean, the Suns could be paying $500 million with taxes and payroll. I mean, for the following, I mean, that's astounding. And of course, they were over the second apron. If it happened, they're over the second apron this year. If it happens again, their pick 7 years out, that gets moved to the end of the first round, no matter what. Is that worth it if your team is, say, a first round exit? Is it worth it to now screw yourself over 7 years in the future? I don't think it is. Like, the way that basketball works, you need to have someone who's willing to spend, but you don't need to have a payroll that's so high that you hurt yourself 7 years in the future. Just find a way to be below the second apron. If you're going to do it once, totally fine. You can do that. The league has no issue with you doing that. It's the other times where, okay, the league cracks down on it. So if you're the Knicks, you don't want to be in a position for that to happen, which is why I expect at some point over the next 3 to 4 years, won't be this year, probably won't be next year, probably be the year after that, where the Knicks are comfortable going into the second apron, going above it, as long as they don't make a move that hurts them. It's the years after that where I would expect them to be a little bit more frugal. I'd also gather, considering how good they are, they can find ways to say, all right, this is where the salary cap is projected. This is the extension max that we have to give to someone. Work backwards. How do we do all this? What can we have here that works? Plenty of ways to go about it. So the Knicks pick is not in jeopardy of being moved to the back of the draft. I'd also be really surprised if the Knicks put themselves in that position. I'd be sort of surprised if the Suns did it. I also feel like there's probably an ego attitude there from Ishbia. But if they're disappointing, there's got to be a look in the mirror, come to Jesus moment. And I would hope for his sake there is, but it's not going to affect any of the teams that own Phoenix's picks. So thank you, Jay. Great question. Dylan Kitts, do you think Mikal Bridges will sign an extension this offseason or next offseason? He can't sign an extension this offseason. He is extension eligible starting next offseason? And the answer is yes. I believe he will sign an extension. Makes a whole lot of sense. I think that these Nova players are going to peer pressure each other and say, look, like we could do something really special. We could win a title together in Villanova. We could win one in New York. And you know what? We could win more than one. Similar to how Jalen Brunson, he won more than one. So they'll keep it together. I expect Bridges to sign the extension. Expect him to be a team player. Certainly hope he does. But next offseason is when he's eligible. Juan Sex Fitty Juan. Appreciate super chat contribution from you. Not getting my hopes up for Kessler unless third team takes Deuce and gives Ainge his draft pick. Do you see the Jazz making that trade? Sure, I see the Jazz making that trade. Do I see the Knicks making that trade? I really don't know. My guess would be no. I think they really do value Deuce McBride. We could talk about using him like we did to get Kessler and then signing Lowry. There's also more concern with the 39-year-old than there is with, 24-year-old? I think it's 24-year-old Deuce McBride. I'd rather have Deuce than Lowry. I just would. But I get it. If you were to say, well, would you rather have Kessler and Lowry than just Deuce? I would rather have Deuce and Richards, honestly, especially because of the other assets that would likely go out in that trade. So, yeah, I definitely see the Jazz making that trade. I don't know if the Knicks would. I really don't. They have faith in their guys. Richard Maldonado. I like Richards also, but what would Charlotte want, and is he actually available? So in terms of what Charlotte would want, my guess would be second-round picks. I mean, something that would come in handy, of course, the Knicks do have a lot of second-round picks. There's also the fact that if they had to, that first-round pick from the Wizards is probably going to convey as 2 second-round picks, but Richards is not worth that. He is a cheap rim-running center who is good, but he's not great. He's a backup. As of right now, they've got Mark Williams running things at the center position. Not a whole lot of other guys. I mean, really not many who can run the 5, which is kind of where, if you're thinking of Precious Achiuwa in a sign and trade, it's where it makes a little bit more sense. They're also at, I want to say 15 players, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players with guaranteed contracts, 2 with 2 ways. So, the Hornets, who are probably not trying to win a lot of games, they could sign a center off the street if they really wanted to. But I'd take it that they'd want other talent, that they'd want another center who they can actually trust, who's similar in some sense. So that's why I wonder if the Knicks don't get it done, if they just bring back Precious, sign that veteran that we talked about, and then reevaluate in December, January, whenever a deal with the Hornets might come into play. And again, do the Hornets want to keep winning games? I gather that they're comfortable being, a mid to late lottery team. They've got good talent, probably aren't looking to tank for Cooper Flag. So we'll see. But, I don't see why he wouldn't be available. But of course, if you're Charlotte, you're going to want someone to replace him. Do the Knicks have that player? That is the question. Jean-Marc, appreciate your super chat contribution. Jeremy, can the Knicks be bold and swing for Brook Lopez? Can we make it work under the second apron? Sure. The Knicks can make it work. There's nothing preventing the Knicks from making this trade work. The question, John, is who are you trading? Brook Lopez, I think he's making like $25 million, 23, something in that ballpark. To be a second apron team, you have to send more money out than have coming in. Not trading Jalen Brunson and, Sims. Not trading Randle for Brook Lopez. You can't trade OG Anunoby. Okay, so what is it then? It's Mitchell Robinson in this case, but then what other salary are you adding? Like, it's Josh Hart? DiVincenzo? I don't buy it. So no, I don't think that Brook Lopez is the guy. I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. Doesn't really work. So I'm going to say no. Richard Bailey, appreciate your super chat contribution. What are the implications if Randle doesn't extend? Will that create pressure to trade him now? Kevin asked this question at the top of the pod. It's a really good question. I'm sure the Knicks are prepared. I just haven't sat down to think through that strategy because there aren't a lot of players who make what Randle makes that still have you under the second apron, who you can extend and feel good about their salary to get you a top tier player with the remainder of all of your draft equity. Not a lot of players that can do that. So it's why I feel like there's a confidence, at least that I have, that Randle does come back and is extended. But again, I want to keep looking into it. I'll see if there's an answer. We'll talk about it on a future pod. Thank you, Richard. TJ2K. Appreciate your super chat contribution as well. Thoughts on Matthias Lessort got his draft rights? I don't think the Knicks do. I think that they acquired it the night of the 2020 draft, but then traded it away later. Because I'm pretty sure that it was I think Daniel Oturu was drafted and they traded to the Wizards. I don't think the Knicks own his rights anymore. When you go to No Trade Clause, which is another really good resource for people who might be interested in looking at the salary cap, they actually list all of the players who the Knicks own draft rights to. It says that they do, but I could have sworn that they traded it. Let's say they didn't, and let's say I'm wrong, TJ2K, and you're right on this one, and if so, my apologies. At that point, it's kind of like, what are they getting out of it? I mean, he is a center. I don't know a ton about his game. I mean, I can see he's 28 years old, so he could bring him over. Does he want to be there? I mean, I'm not really sure. Truly. Truly don't know. So, bit of a mystery box. I wouldn't count on him at this point in time, but he's got a good EuroLeague career. Would be cheap. I just think that Hukporti is the option that they would have, or just bring back Precious Achiuwa. Getting Lessort over, also, does Lessort want to come over? I mean, like he's been playing in Europe. He wouldn't get that chance here. There's no clear-cut role. So I don't think so. But I appreciate the question. Thank you. Ryan Sartor. Thank you, Ryan. My friend is a big Thunder fan, always saying Sam Prest is a genius. Do you think the Thunder make better moves than the Knicks? I want to beat them. I think each team relied on their strengths to become a contender. The Thunder took one route that the Knicks were never able to take, which was a deep rebuild. And the Thunder didn't even rebuild for that long. It took, 3 seasons? But they got really lucky. And luck, it's not a slight against the Thunder. Luck has a lot to do with everything here. They got SGA as part of a mammoth trade. All of their decisions were through trade or the draft. Really being able to tank and pick well, get lucky there too. I mean, they had the second pick. They got Chet Holmgren. I was lucky. They made the best of their luck by trading into the draft and gotten Jalen Williams. There's a lot that they've done. But they've also had the luxury of tanking. That's not something the Knicks had the luxury of. When you think about NBA teams, think about how many had star free agent signings. Not a whole lot currently. A lot of players drafted or traded. The Knicks are a contender, which feels really great to say. And the Knicks signed their 2 best players as free agents. I mean, that's awesome. That's a testament to how you can go so many different ways about building a team. And because it hasn't been done before, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. It also doesn't mean that because it hasn't been done before that it's not crazy. If you want to say that the path that the Knicks took is crazy, it's never going to work, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't result in a championship. But I think they're a hell of a lot closer to their goal than having bottomed out, tanked, and gotten to that point. Like, the Thunder were able to do what they did because they took advantage of low cost salaries, and they did so well in the lottery of the draft. The other thought here, again, this isn't a slight against Presti. He's a great general manager, a great leader of their basketball operations. I think every single pick that the Thunder have made outside of the lottery since 2012, it's like 2012 to 2019 or something. All of those guys out of the league. And you might be thinking, well, 2012 was a long time ago. I mean, that's 32 years old. Yeah, it's true. But the Thunder in the last dozen years have been incredible at drafting within the lottery. They've done their job. Outside of the lottery, they haven't. They haven't found a lot of good talent. I mean, I could quite literally go through the list of Thunder draft picks outside of that, outside of the lottery, and it wouldn't be really pretty. I mean, I'll do it. I'll do it right now. I mean, well, it's hard because of trades, so I won't do it. They traded Şengün to the Rockets. I mean, obviously he was great, but he wasn't really their pick. He was the Rockets. But if you look at the players who they've drafted outside of the lottery, it's been tough for them. That's the opposite for the Knicks. The Knicks have found a lot of talent outside of the lottery. In fact, their team right now, outside of, well, I guess it's Randle and Bridges for the most part, non-lottery guys. That's awesome. It's also a testament to where they focus. So Presti did the best he could with what he had, and the Thunder also benefited from being able to trade. What was it? They drafted Ibaka, who was outside of the lottery. To be clear, that was a great selection. Traded Ibaka to Orlando and got Sabonis, and traded Sabonis to Indiana and got Paul George, and then traded Paul George to LA and got SGA. That's awesome. The best that the Knicks got out of their talent was Mitchell Robinson. It's not a slight on Mitchell Robinson. It just goes to show that they were a barren wasteland. They had nothing to offer. They couldn't continue to soup anyone in the way that a pick in the lottery, a pick outside of the lottery with Ibaka led to SGA. Like, that's the linear thought. So Presti did an incredible job there. The Knicks have done more with less, and the Thunder have done more with more, and both have done an incredible job. So he is a genius. And I would also love to see the Knicks beat the Thunder in the finals as well, Ryan. But the Knicks are, I mean, they've got geniuses too, and it feels good. Thank you, Ryan. Kevin Danishevsky once again. Is there a trade to ensure Dante DiVincenzo gets enough time? I think he's going to get enough time. I just do. Like, every year we walk into training camp with concerns of playing time, and always finds a way to shake itself out. Someone gets hurt. Someone needs less time. Someone's in foul trouble. It always happens. So I still think he's going to get enough time. He's going to get 23, 24 minutes a game at the end of the season, I'd gather. That's plenty. That's half the game for a guy coming off the bench. I don't think Dante DiVincenzo is going to be like, damn, I hate the fact that my Nova teammates are playing ahead of me. I think he'd be okay with it. Thank you, Kevin. Juanon. Appreciate it, Juanon. Thank you. Jared Vanderbilt would fit this team perfectly. Just a thought I had, and it seems there's still stuff to shake out with LA and a few other teams like the Hawks, Pelicans, Jazz, and the Warriors. I don't know if Vanderbilt would fit perfectly. I think he feels like, from what I know of Vanderbilt, more of a 4 than a 5. He's not going to do exactly what the Knicks like. I mean, he makes sense with someone like Anthony Davis, but that's also, I mean, Davis is also playing more minutes at the 5, and Vanderbilt was hurt, so that could be a reason too. But I just don't know if he'd be a great fit for the Knicks. I feel like his numbers just aren't quite there. He's been a big deflection guy, that much I will say, and the Knicks have been better about that. Defensively is really good. The shot's just not quite there. And he's got good offensive rebounding numbers. He does. I'll say that. But I just don't think the Knicks are playing him as a rim running 5. I think they see him more as like a 5 in the body of a 4, but not quite like Precious. I'd have to watch more of him. I don't think he's quite the fit. But also, if you're the Lakers, do you really want to move him? What are you moving him for? If you're the Knicks, how are you getting him? What makes sense to move for him? I don't think there are a lot of guys that really do that. I mean, he's earning around $12 million a year. So who are you trading for him? You're trading Mitch. I mean, that's what we're saying. I wouldn't do that. I would stay away from that personally. And yeah, I mean, other teams like Hawks, Pelicans, Jazz, the Warriors, it seems that those teams are primarily really the Jazz, Pelicans, and the Warriors. Those teams are involved in Ingram or Markkanen deals in some way. The Hawks, I think they're probably close to done, I would imagine. I don't know. So yeah, thank you, Junon. Kevin King. Wow, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the super chat. Thanks for the content. I'm just thinking maybe sign Precious and Paul Reed and have them fight over the second string center. Also, two serviceable centers for Mitch Insurance. I agree. The question, of course, for either of those players, if one signs first, does the other say, well, I don't want to sign in New York because where's my playing time? How are you going to prioritize me? I don't want to be signed to a contract and then not play. That could hurt my earnings potential. That could hurt what I'm able to do from just a playing standpoint. I think if you were to sign Achua and then kind of bait and switch him by trading for another player, you could get around it. It'd be dirty, but you could do it. But it's hard to get two free agents to both agree to come to a team where playing time is already a bit limited. So I don't think that it's going to be. But Kevin, I really appreciate the super chat contribution and the question. I like the creativity there. I just don't think. I think one of them says, "Nah, it's not for me." So thank you. El Coriano 11, appreciate super chat from you. How many years would Knicks have to be above the second apron for the Nets to automatically receive the 30th pick? More than 2 years? Yes, it would have to be at least a 2-year window. Answered that earlier as well. So that's settled. The Knicks wouldn't also have to give it to the Nets. It'd be a pick 7 years out. So really, if they went over the second apron, they can't do it this year, right? Let's say they did it the following year. And let's say they did it the following year again. It'd be the 2033 pick. It's not owned by the Nets. Has no issue. I just would be incredibly shocked if the Knicks got to a point where their spending was so out of line that that pick were frozen. I really do. And then also from El Coriano 11, why was OG given a player option for the 5th year with the overpay? Why not team option? Expect Brunson, Randle, Mikal also getting player options. Brunson, I'm sure, will get a player option, as Fred Katz wrote in his article today for The Athletic, which was very good. And John has pointed this out too. If Brunson signs a contract that can let him hit the free agency market after year 10, he could sign a 35% max contract. As of right now, he can only sign a 30% max contract. And as of this waking moment, really July 12th, he could only sign for 140% of this upcoming year's salary. So, for Randle, I gather he'd have a player option too, and Bridges he probably does as well. I don't see the harm in the player option. I think, by the way that the salary cap will change, I think it's fine. When you look at it on paper right now, 5 years out, 4 years out, it's a lot of money, but a lot can change. I mean, the salary cap based on the new CBA or the new TV deal, it could be $40 million more, right? It could be $50 million more. And if we're here and we're looking at it and we're looking at a $200 million cap, OG is earning a quarter of that. And that's really good money. And that's why he might opt out. It depends on age and injury. And the ideal goal here is that he doesn't opt out. The Knicks just extend that salary. They give him a player option. He declines it, and they give him an extension. We'll see. That's something they can worry about 4 years from now. But I appreciate your Super Chat contributions. Thank you. Konyon Pepper. Thank you. Appreciate the Super Chat contribution there. Are you buying any Kessler for Mitch rumors? I am not. I'm not buying it because the Knicks, if the Knicks were to do that, the best thing for them to do is they'd create a TPE out of it, right? So Mitch is earning like $14 million. Kessler's earning a little under $3 million, so they'd get $11 or so million TPE. They need to find salary to slot into that. They could do it. It's just you need to find the right talent to acquire into that. And there's pressure on you to now pay for that talent. It has to be good talent, probably. So I don't really buy it. I think the Knicks are comfortable keeping Mitch. He's a starting caliber center. I've also seen, this is not here, but in general, ideas of Mitch not being a starting caliber center. He is. He is a starting center. The Knicks benefited last year because they had two centers who were capable of starting. One just got hurt. So he's going to keep starting, and he should, because he's a starting center, not just a center who is starting. But I think his value comes in more next summer. Thank you. Appreciate that Super Chat contribution. And another one from Kevin. In terms of players for Julius, what about Butler? Well, how are the Knicks getting Jimmy Butler, Kevin? What are they giving up in this case? Like, I gather it would have to be Mitchell Robinson, and it would have to be Julius Randle at minimum. Okay. Well, the problem with all of that is pretty sure Jimmy Butler is extension eligible, or even he's hitting free agency. Let's see. As a reminder, Jimmy Butler has a player option. So Jimmy Butler would have to take the player option, which is a lot of pressure on the Knicks. If he doesn't take the player option, then, like, yes, you could theoretically figure out a sign and trade, but if that will impact the Knicks' moves potentially. Now you have to worry about where's he going, what team offers him money, all of that. So it works, but you'd have to have confidence that you can extend Jimmy Butler. I mean, fit is also a bit questionable, but let's say it is Jimmy Butler, right? Let's say that's what the Knicks did. You'd have to extend him right away on a 2-year, 105% contract, which they could do. They absolutely could do it. But does Jimmy Butler want more than that if that's not the full 35% max they could get? So if he's going to hurt your flexibility in terms of how you can move salary in or out, I think it's a problem. And it's tough. The toughest thing about the Mikal Bridges trade, in addition to Kevin being right about it, is you could look at the Raptors, right? And you could say, oh, well, the Knicks aren't going to trade with a team that there's a lawsuit for. And then they did. Because, oh, well, the Knicks aren't going to trade with their crosstown rivals, with the Nets that they haven't made a deal with since 1983. And then they did. And then you look at the Heat and be like, well, they're not going to trade with Pat Riley. And the only trade they've ever made with the Heat was moving Riley to Miami. And I still think that's a bridge too far. And I'll still be of the mindset of, I'll believe it when I see it. Having said that, I didn't believe the Nets trade until I saw it, and then it happened. So you never know. But Kevin, it all comes down to flexibility with moving contracts. Johnny Chiba. Thank you, Johnny. Can the front office swing a multi-team deal for Walker Kessler without losing its core? That's going to be their goal. Certainly. I mean, we talked through salary and what you can do right now. If we're not counting Precious Achua as core, it's Achua and draft compensation. But how valuable is that draft compensation if it hurts you from doing other things that you might want to do next summer? It's not worth it at that point. So it's possible that they can't do a multi-team deal. It's also possible the Knicks don't want to do a multi-team deal that subtracts from the core. So it's all about the price. Always is. If the center point isn't a focus quite in that way, the Knicks shouldn't move their core. Like, the Knicks shouldn't be moving Deuce McBride for Nick Richards. Period. End of story. But there's other salary they can use, which I'm totally fine with. And there are picks that I think a team would benefit from that. Totally fine with. This also goes back to the question that was asked of if the Knicks would even be comfortable moving. If the Hornets would be comfortable moving Nick Richards. It could be that the Hornets have zero interest in moving Nick Richards, but at the deadline, when there's only 25 some odd games to go, and you try things out, that's when it could work. So that's hence why I'd add salaries and do all that jazz. Thank you, Johnny Chiba. Jean-Marc, thank you again. Wow, you guys have been so generous today. I really appreciate it. Jeremy, any thoughts on Omer Yurtseven? You can see I'm desperate for a Knicks backup center. Omer Yurtseven, he didn't have a great season with the Jazz. I think there's a reason when they let him go. I'd say no. If they thought there was value there, then they probably would have kept him. But when a tanking team lets you go and you don't get scooped up, probably not the best option. So I get your desperation, but I don't think you have to be desperate. I think ideally you just truly, the backup center position does not need to be solved today. It doesn't need to be solved this summer. It's one of those things where you could kind of stop the bleeding in some way and then reevaluate it midseason. But of course, the biggest concern for why people want a backup center, I would gather, and this isn't judging, this is just commenting, has everything to do with a lack of trust in Mitchell Robinson's health. I think if Mitchell Robinson goes down, then that's a huge problem. I don't have to, I'm stating the obvious here, but the Knicks make do. They've made do. They've found ways. It's why I don't expect them to go into the season without someone who can step in some capacity. But they really might give Jericho Sims more minutes. They might bump up Precious Achiuwa if he's still here, and then Jericho Sims plays. That could truly be it. They're at a disadvantage, unfortunately. I don't think that Hartenstein leaving them cripples them by any stretch. It hurts them, of course, but that's the benefit of at least having Mitchell Robinson. If Hartenstein were here, the Knicks would have moved Mitchell Robinson. That's not speculation. That's just basic math with the hard cap. They had to. And of course, then they would have replenished somehow. So now losing an asset, it hurts, but they'll find a way to get past it. They just can't give up too much to find a way to make up for the loss of Hartenstein because they have Mitchell Robinson. So it's really making up for the backup center, which shouldn't cost them an arm and a leg. It just shouldn't. Thank you, Sean. Robert Cross. Hello, sir. First time, long time. Cutlets. I always forget what iFarts stands for as an acronym. Kev, if you remember it, let me know. Andrew always reminds me what it is. And I know this is Kevin's Kevin. Oh my God, he's really gonna kill me. He's gonna take back that money. Robert, talking about the second. I'll just move on from that. The second round picks will have more value going forward. If true, can we throw Kevin? That's why I said Kevin, because I saw Kevin's name out of the corner of my eye. If true, can we throw Kevin Danishevsky for a nachos at MSG #DeChip? I like the fact, I don't know if this was intentional, but Kevin saying to Chip, oh my God, I did it again. Robert, it's been a really long week. We had a lot of shows for 4th of July. So for Robert, nice little double entendre with DeChip, the championship, and also DeChip nachos. You get chips from nachos. So I'm going to assume that Robert did it on purpose. Second round picks are going to have more value going forward because of the second round exception. We saw teams trading up the second round. You want to get talent that's towards top of the draft of day 2. And in terms of getting those guys, you need to trade second rounders, most likely to move up. The Knicks did that to go from 38 to 34. So at least I believe they did that. They could have also been trading into 34 because I know they also got 40. A lot of moves. Knicks are crazy people in the best way. So yeah, there could be some value going forward. There's probably a ton of value going forward. Um, Kevin and I were even talking offline after the last episode of C.R.E.A.M about the new wave of value is going to be those rookie contracts, but especially the second round ones because of the second round exception. So, yeah, it's true. And honestly, uh, I'd love some nachos right now. Yes, thank you, Kev. Is it fair and reasonable to say? That's what it is. Is it fair and reasonable to say that second round picks will have more value going forward? And the answer is yes. And honestly, because I have to complete the rule of three, I will do it by saying, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the super chat contribution. Buzzer beater. Hey, thank you. Why would Charlotte want to trade Richards? Again, valid question. They may not. They may not want to do it. They might be more comfortable doing it at the deadline if they feel they can squeeze a little bit more value out from what the Knicks have. And if that's the case, if I'm the Knicks, one thing I could do is run it back. The other thing, pay someone a little bit more money out of the taxpayer mid-level to help me get some level of talent. Like, that's what I would do. If you keep everything the same, bring Precious Achiuwa back, sign Arcidiacono because we know they're going to do that. Although, actually, if I'm counting roster spots correctly, no, it'd be Achiuwa. Well, the way you get around it, you sign McCullough to a two-way, which that's fine. So then, going back to what I'm saying, sign Achiuwa, bring back Arcidiacono on a minimum contract, and then sign Shamet, Bullock. It doesn't really matter at that point. Sign someone. It's probably not going to be Lowry because there's not enough playing time, but someone who is not expecting to play. Give them a nice little bump in salary as hey, thank you, Shamet. Or Bullock, hey, you're making the same amount of money as you would be if you got the veteran minimum. The only difference is you're more likely to be traded. That's what I would do. But I agree, Buzzer Beater. There's no guarantee that the Hornets even want to trade Nick Richards. Same as how there's no guarantee that the Jazz want to or do trade Walker Kessler. And if that's the case, run it back with the questions that you have now. So, thank you. Do Ma Con Kak. Thank you for the super chat. Any chance we can trade for Wendell Carter Jr.? How would this work on the cap? Preference to keep Mitch as well. Also, love your work, Jeremy. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any chance to trade for Wendell Carter Jr.? Probably not. It would feature Mitchell Robinson. It would feature Dante DiVincenzo. Or it would feature Josh Hart. Well, actually, it wouldn't feature Josh Hart. Salary's too large. Unless someone were paired with Wendell Carter Jr. I don't think so. It's just none of those options either make sense or feel plausible. That's just because of working with the cap. I just don't think it's going to work. To me, a Wendell Carter Jr. team is probably the Pelicans. I should add, apparently in the Discord, this is from Jessica, because she mentioned it earlier by passing it along, as it was something that I just hadn't seen, as I don't spend a ton of time in the Discord. And Jessica said, and I'm quoting, this is from an anonymous person, that's totally fine. Flaw with the cap or no cap. New Orleans is also in the hunt for a center and have some really young, talented wings and not enough playing time. The player they could throw in might be better than we can. So I get the criticism with the cap or no cap, but using New Orleans as the reason to hunt for the center has nothing to do with the Knicks, right? Like, when we say New Orleans and a center, we probably mean someone who's earning more money than the Knicks could do anything with. They're not. If Ingram is the player going out, for example, with the money, it doesn't work for the Knicks. There's a reason I haven't mentioned a player like Ingram. It's everything to do with the first apron. You'd have to find a third team and then make it work and all of that. And but they're real, like the Pelicans' young, talented wings. Herbert Jones is going anywhere, and Trey Murphy's not going anywhere. So it's Brandon Ingram. That's who we're talking about. And that doesn't make sense with the Knicks. So, I get the criticism. I also don't, because it doesn't apply to the Knicks. That's why it wasn't mentioned. So Like, I just don't see why the Pelicans, who are likely going after higher salary players that benefit them, like a Jared Allen type, they're probably not going after the Nick Richards or the Walker Kesslers of the world. They're probably going after the Wendell Carter Juniors. Like, there's other ways for them to make salary that make more sense that have nothing to do with the wings. So that's the main point behind the Pelicans. The super chat just reminded me of that, and I wanted to work it in somehow. So I just don't think Wendell Carter Jr. makes sense here in the Knicks for what they'd have to give up. But I do think, there's merit to the Pelicans. It's just a matter of what can the Pelicans afford. And I know this is not Pelicans film school, but looking through their salaries, I mean, they do have the non-taxpayer mid-level. And Wendell Carter Jr., his salary, if memory serves, which it doesn't, which is exactly why I'm looking it up in real time. Wendell Carter Jr.'s salary this year is $11.95 million, which means that his salary could slide right in to the $12.8 million non-taxpayer mid-level exception. The problem, of course, is that the Pelicans, they're $7.7 million below the first apron. If they use that non-taxpayer mid-level, then they will actually be above it, which is a problem. So they'd have to either trade Trey Murphy, which they're not going to do, or Jordan Hawkins, or Herb Jones. So it really comes down to moving Brandon Ingram and then getting other salary back, because they can't just simply add Wendell Carter Jr. So the question that Jessica brought up from the Discord, like, that's a perfect example of the Pelicans finding a center that makes more sense to them. But Wendell Carter Jr. doesn't make sense to the Knicks because of the financial component of it. So it's why I just wouldn't expect Wendell Carter Jr. to be a Knick. I would expect him to be a Pelican in some manner. Look at the players the Magic have. I mean, just this year, Jonathan Isaac, Goga Bitadze, Mo Wagner. Those are three names of guys who could theoretically see time at the 5. Do they want to bring back Wendell Carter Jr., or do they want to trade him and maybe get a point guard out of it, maybe get more shooting? I don't know. But I appreciate the super chat contribution nonetheless, so thank you. Buzzer beater. What's up, Cutlets? Do you have a good recipe? I do really enjoy cooking. It's something I love to do. Don't have a ton of time to do it, as you could probably imagine. So tonight, I'll tell you good recipes. I mean, what I did tonight, what I started the process for, and I'll do more of. I am going to take mac and cheese, but make it a little fancier, right? So it's store-bought mac and cheese, right? It's 8:20, gonna leave the pod, gonna cook, gonna catch up on the boys. And then what I did earlier, I sauteed some wild mushrooms that I bought at the farmer's market, and they're great. You just let them cook, toss some butter in there, salt and pepper for seasoning, a little other, anything else, I'll do the box mac and cheese, probably throw in some cayenne, toss the mushrooms into that mac and cheese, might toast some breadcrumbs if I feel really, special, but I probably don't. Also made some great Swiss chard, I should say. Put Swiss chard, olive oil, seasoned it. Got, minced some garlic. Did that. Chicken shawarma from Trader Joe's, if I really feel like doing that too, if I don't have enough protein. So yeah, I mean, that's on the menu for today, but I also, guilty pleasure. I bought Nestle at the supermarket. Bought some milk. Like, why not? Treat yourself. I feel like we all should. But in terms of other recipes, make really good steak. Nice medium rare steak. I'm trying to think of what else I do that I really enjoy. Yeah, I love cooking mushrooms. They're delicious. Great protein. Feel healthy. Made a mushroom steak the other day. And it may not sound great, but you prepare it very similar to that of an actual steak. Tastes delicious. Texture's a little different. But that's that. I hate baking. Baking sucks. It's so precise. I can't do it. I'm more of a let's get creative in the kitchen. So no, but I should do cutlets at some point. I'll try it. frying is always a little bit of a hassle. But I appreciate it, Buzzer Beater. It's a great question. I'm happy to give a little bit more insight into what I do. Robert Cross, I don't want to hear anything about Money Mitch next summer and a future cap or no cap fantasy. Robert, that's great. You know what? We will do our best to give you a trigger warning. You know, maybe Andrew just says in the pod, like, Robert Cross, we know you're listening. Fast forward to this point, and then you can avoid it. And then when he's traded, ignorance can be bliss for you. So it's going to happen, Robert. Might as well face it now. Sorry, I mean, Kevin. And with that, I think, unless there's another super chat contribution, of course, appreciate all the comments and the questions as well that Kev was able to put up there. We have anything else? We're good. I got the thank you message on the screen, so thank you message it is. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't know if this will be the last episode of C.R.E.A.M, but if it is for this summer, it has been a pleasure. So thank you very much. Really enjoy doing this with all of you and appreciate all your thoughts and wishes. It's just, I'm flattered. So for those of you, I've mentioned this, if you're going to be at Summer League, please, 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 don't prove me wrong. No, please come to our meetup if you're there on the 14th. I will also be in attendance for the Knicks Nets game. Hit me up. Happy to say hi. Happy to talk about anything that you're looking for, whether it's Knicks, salary cap, drone shows, or cooking, or anything else. Happy to shoot the shit. I'll have a good time. It's way too hot, so we got to talk about something other than the Heat. That's boring. And we don't want to talk about the Miami Heat because fuck the Heat. So thank you all. Looking forward to seeing you soon in person or on a pod. And be well. Take care.